The banking sector, ladies and gentlemen, is the focus of our next deep dive session. And this session involves a panel discussion with eminent personalities from the central bank, chief executives of leading local and foreign banks. The panel will be moderated by Mr. Rajendra Tyagaraja, the former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce.
Ayubowan, Vanakkam, good morning. Good afternoon, Colombo, morning in London. It is indeed a privilege to moderate the session focusing on banking. Today we have a distinguished panel carefully selected for their deep insights and experience in this very important sector. As we have approximately 55 minutes or so for the discussion, what I propose to do is to direct specific questions to our eminent four panelists, covering 8 diverse topics, which include regulation, global banking, SME development, digitalization and fintech engagement, port city governance, adaptation to the new normal, making use of capital markets, and sustainable banking initiatives. A brief introduction to our panelists today. Mrs. Yvette Fernando, a career central banker who has probably more than 2.5 decades in central banking, and today serves as a deputy governor in the leadership team of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. We then have Mr. Bingumal Tevarathandri, another career banker who has extensive international experience within the Standard Chartered network and today serves as the country CEO of SEB in Sri Lanka. Mr. Sujiva Rajapaksa, a past president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, a very senior chartered accountant who currently also serves as a non-executive director chairman of the People's Bank. And Mr. Lakshman Silva, again, a banker with more than 30 years of diverse experience, today serves as the CEO of the DFCC Banking Group and also double hats as the chairman of the Sri Lanka Banks Association. What I'm proposing to do, ladies and gentlemen, is to direct the first few questions to each of you as panelists and keep the engagement time to a max of 40 minutes so that each of you, a request is to try and confine your responses to each question to a max of 5 minutes. And then we will open the session for Q&A, maybe 10 to 12 minutes, depending on the audience response. And then we will have a round of concluding observations from each of the panelists before we conclude the session. So let me start the session with the first question. Sri Lanka has been faced with multiple challenges in the past 3 years, starting with the April 2019 terrorist attack, the COVID pandemic, and also a country downgrade by a couple of the international rating agencies. As a career central banker, Yvette, you have seen this country go through multiple cycles of ups and downs during the past 2 or so decades. How would you assess the current state of play of the quality of resilience of the Sri Lanka banking system, taking the perspective of your long career, distinguished career as a bank regulator? To you, Yvette.
Ayubowan to all viewers. Let me first give a brief overview of the banking system. The history of Sri Lanka's banking sector spans over several decades, and most banks operating in the country today, be they domestic or foreign, state-owned or privately owned, have been an intrinsic part of the economy during all good times and times of distress. Total assets of the banking sector amounts to approximately US dollars 8.5 billion, that is about 14.7 trillion Sri Lanka rupees, representing around 72.5% of the entire financial system of the country. These banks have catered to varied needs of the country through a multitude of business models that suits the identified niche markets, customer segments, expertise and strategic directions. As bank regulators, we have always strived to strike a proper balance between business interest and resilience of the banking system. In other words, we continue to provide a regulatory framework that facilitates the banks to operate in a safe and sound manner with prudence, while catering to the needs of the economy and thereby achieving their business objectives. As a prelude to the specific question posed by the moderator, let me list few items that contribute to the strong resilience in the banking sector. Overall, Sri Lanka has adopted internationally accepted regulatory requirements and best practices with appropriate adaptations where possible to suit local circumstances. They include capital and liquidity requirements, mandatory good governance requirements, specific prudential requirements with respect to mitigating credit risk, liquidity risk, market risk, operational risk, and very importantly paying greater attention to technology risk, strategic risk, legal and compliance risks. Preparation of financial accounts in line with internationally accepted and locally adopted accounting standards. Auditing to be carried out by a panel of auditors selected by the regulator. Foreign exchange market conduct, derivative transactions and customer protection. Our guiding principle has been to ensure that the banking system operates within a strong risk management framework. However, as regulators, what we specify is a minimum requirement looking at the entire system as a whole. But that does not mean that boards of directors of these banks cannot adopt what they feel fit. Therefore, it is compulsorily and it is kind of obligatory on the part of the boards of directors of these banks to further strengthen their risk management framework, taking note of the nature, size and complexities of each entity. The central bank is also reviewing these legal and prudential requirements to simplify and streamline them. In addition, we have the necessary legislative frameworks, a deposit insurance scheme, a dynamic and an evolving payment and settlement system with its product suite introduced with prudence and careful consideration, the regional expansion of few banks and their recognition in such geographies and internationally, existence of several foreign banks with global presence, the credit rating by external credit agencies, a credible credit information bureau, and more importantly, professionals with diverse skills, wide experience and relevant competencies. They too enhance the robustness of the banking sector. What I have highlighted so far, coupled with an intense supervisory framework undertaken by the central bank, amply demonstrates the existence of a dynamic and strong banking system. Even during the recent specific challenging times that you informed, the banking sector has exhibited a moderate growth and going forward displays a fairly robust growth momentum while providing the necessary support to their customers and the economy at large. Further, the central bank was able to provide certain flexibilities in prudential requirements, considering the safety buffers built over the recent years by these banks. So, all in all, I am confident of the resilience of the banking system as a whole, provided we continue to take proactive measures to address any potential risks on a timely basis. I think I have responded by giving some examples to your question, Mr. Tyagarajan.
Thank you very much, Yvette. I think a very focused and a clear message, proactive governance and a resilient banking sector. Let's move on to the second question. Standard Chartered has a long and a deep-rooted history of being a leading full-service bank, foreign bank, operating in this country for over a century. How well is your bank positioned to support the banking requirements of any prospective investor in Sri Lanka? This question is to Bingu Madhu.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, hi, Bhuvan. As a leading bank in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, I believe that we have a role to play. And as the only bank that can cover Asia and Africa from Sri Lanka, I think that becomes much more important that we play a significant role in this space. So what we are doing now is talking to specific sectors without doing massive roadshows. What we internally do is talking to specific sectors like ports and logistics, ICT, power, as well as hospitality, and talking to them about the specific opportunities in Sri Lanka. What we have seen in the last 18 months is even during the pandemic, we've seen investments coming into industries like IT as well as for glass manufacturing. So there are conversations happening around logistics and ports. Specifically on the power sector, there's a massive opportunity to go into renewable energy. Sri Lanka has already come up with plans to do LNG, and there are a lot of opportunities in the sustainable finance space. As a bank, we kept about $80 billion aside for sustainable finance this year. 86% of that will come to the emerging markets like Sri Lanka. We also have done a study with our own investors, about 600 investors, and the findings are that Sri Lanka has a potential of $16 billion into sustainable financing. So that's where the opportunity is, and we are talking to these untapped capital pools to get them into Sri Lanka. Specifically about the port city, I think that's a hot topic today. As a bank, we are positive, but we believe that we have to be patient. What we expect from the policymakers is not to change the policies every 5 years, 6 years. It's extremely important that we keep on getting better in terms of openness and be open for business. We believe that 3 types of clients will move into Sri Lanka to do specific businesses in the port city. One piece that I would personally expect is the Sri Lankan clients who got some kind of a global presence to do business in Sri Lanka as a regional or a global headquarters. The Sri Lankans for Sri Lanka. The second piece is corporates who are already in South Asia but managing the region from a faraway place like Hong Kong or maybe from Singapore or a different time zone to come to Sri Lanka and manage the region from Sri Lanka. The other opportunity is the corporates who are already in India looking at de-risking some amount of business from India to another market, and Sri Lanka will act as India plus one. So that's another big opportunity to do business in Sri Lanka. Now, of course, clients will look at, these corporates will look at things like when there's a large domestic market, we sometimes lose out on that one compared to a market like India, but we also have seen markets as Singapore and Hong Kong. They're not large markets, but they attract investments. There are other areas like the unique skill set, staying close to buyers and suppliers, basically having the supply chain around you. Of course, also considering the tax treaties. Now, talking about the tax, I think gone are the days where we, go and talk to clients and bring them into a country solely looking at the tax benefits they have or the treaty benefits they have. We have to promote clients who come and do real treasury activities in Sri Lanka. So as a bank, I can tell you that the franchise is definitely ready to grab those opportunities in terms of liquidity management, treasury management, corporate finance, M&A, all those expertise. Either we have it in Sri Lanka already or we have a global pool sitting in Singapore, India supporting us. In terms of capital, we are well capitalized, and from LCR perspective, we have enough liquidity in the system. So more than happy and ready to grab the opportunity as well as support the country. And we've seen in our footprint markets like Hong Kong and Singapore in the last 40-50 years how these markets have evolved to become a fully fledged IFC. So I think it's time for Sri Lanka, and we are more than happy to partner with Sri Lanka in that journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bingu. I think a very clear message again, true to your tagline, we are here to stay. So I think the key thing is you have been here for more than a century and believe in the medium to long-term journey of the country's prosperity, which is very encouraging. Also, to note that there is a significant component of the emerging market allocation of funds available to support quality-focused investments. And the fact that you have already been doing your homework on sector-focused engagements. So it's again very encouraging. Thank you, Bingu. Moving on to the SME support sector. Sri Lanka has given, or its modest geographic size and population has always prided itself in the services sector, as well as using its SME sector to power economic growth. As the lead of one of the country's two largest public sector banks, Sujiva, how well are local banks, in your opinion, support SMEs to play their part in the vital segment relating to supply chain financing? Over to you.
Good morning, Tia. Good afternoon for others, and Aibuan. Thank you very much for the kind invitation extended for People's Bank to take part in this absolutely important seminar, worldwide seminar. Looking at from the SME sector, which is one of the very, very important sectors, and we need to understand about the size of the SME sector in any of the countries. Because if you know about the, the more than 75% of the total number of entrepreneurs are here, any country is from SME. And also SME provides about 45% of the employment in most of the countries. And if you take GDP as a percentage, I think 52% here in Sri Lanka comes from SME. So that shows about how big this SME sector is. But also we understand that because of the SME sector, growth is definitely, sometimes identified as important to provide more employment, because certain cases, the other sectors may not be able to provide more employment, but where the SME sector is concerned, you can grow by generating employment, by creating more and more entrepreneurs, which is very important. And regional, the disparities also can be brought, the minimized, and inclusive growth is one of the other matters that we need to understand. But again, SME sector, here in Sri Lanka also face certain things, certain difficulties in accessing funds, which is important. And difficulty in managing funds, sometimes it's difficult. And collateral has been a major issue for these SME sector people. And also there's a kind of a mismatch or the expectation gap between the SME sector entrepreneur and the banker, because that is because unwillingness of banks to lend without solid collateral has become a major issue. And funding opportunities also sometimes, SME and the other sector, there's a funding opportunity, the mismatch, and which is important. And misunderstanding between banks and SME sector per se has been another issue. But again, we had to looking at from bankers. I think I'm not talking only for People's Bank, but I'm looking at broader perspective. And of course, in our case, People's Bank is having about 14 million customers in the portfolio out of 22.5 million. The numbers here in Sri Lanka, I think, which is very large. And whereas even other banks, I know, they also have fairly large amount of customers. And in our case, we have been mainly focusing on SME sector from the inception, which is very important. And invaluable kind of knowledge transformation has been happening, because SME sector expect that kind of the service from a banker. It's not a typical banking business, but you need to have some kind of hand-holding exercise with this SME people. That's important. And we have been pioneering in SME lending for a large amount of customers here in Sri Lanka. And governance aspect is absolutely important in SME sector, which we have seen lacking, because now SME sector, they sometimes do not believe in certain maintaining proper set of accounts, payment of taxes on time, or meeting other or regulatory requirements and things like that. So those need to be certainly brought into their the systems, which is very important. I'm very happy. The IWAD Deputy Governor is here seated next to me, and recently Central Bank has brought in a very, very important regulation from 2021 year onwards, all the banks to grow their SME portfolio by 20%, which is very important. Every year on year, you need to grow that business. That means, Central Bank and the country at large is really serious looking at promoting this SME sector, which is a very commendable thing, because we also do have a certain mechanism approaching, SME sector rather than corporate sector, because SME sector, you need to look at them differently, because that's very important. We also have separate sections. I'm sure other banks also have separate divisions for SME sectors to look at their, what they do, and look at their entrepreneurship and look at their other competencies differently, because there we have our officers, we have our experts to not to just become a typical banker, but to become a different role model, because that I think we have in our People's Bank, we have seen that has been really proven done very well, which is very, very important. So more than anything, I think we have to look at and see about the environmental and social management system, which is very important. Even international or other multilateral agencies, they look at this kind of system, which we have in our People's Bank. I'm sure even other banks also we have this kind of system. Overall, Tia, I'm very happy to say that, almost all the banks here in Sri Lanka, we are looking at, because we understand that the SME sector is the backbone of any economy. So as a result, bankers are looking at very seriously. But we have to look at more closely and make sure that, we nurture this SME sector here. And then because of the fact that I told the 52% of our GDP comes from SME sector, I think, which is very, very important at this moment. Let me conclude my first presentation, Tia, with that note.
Thank you very much, Sujiva. I think a very key message, reiterating the commitment and the significance of the SME sector in Sri Lanka. But also, I think we came out with two important points. On one side, the concern about collateral-based lending on one side, and the other side, the regulatory incentive to systematically grow banks' commitment towards this sector. So I think this is a very timely opportunity for banks like yourselves and the entire sector to really understand the value of supply chains, and also see how you could engage the entire chain to make sure that the key lack most of these SMEs have, which is an access to a proper market, is addressed. And by doing that, you gradually replace collateral-based banking with cash flow-based banking. So I think that's a very timely topic. Can I come in? Thank you very much. Moving on to you, Lakshman. Digitalization in banking often is confused with either mobile banking and or confined to the front-end user experience in any form of automation. In your opinion, as a seasoned banker, has the Sri Lankan banking system matured enough to embrace a clear roadmap towards digitalization? And if so, I'd like you to articulate maybe 2 or 3 clear examples over the past decade as what we have done in the space.
Hi, Bhuvan. Yeah, I hope that you can hear me.
Yes, very well. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and Bhuvan, and good afternoon. As you correctly mentioned, I think, and also explained by the Deputy Governor, some of these initiatives in Sri Lankan banking with regard to the digitalization got fast-tracked, I would say, after the disasters, the 2 disasters that Sri Lanka banking and the community in general has to face since 2019. I think by that time, the banks were ready to a great extent of implementing some of their strategies with regard to the digitalization. And as you mentioned, at least to some extent, mobile banking services. So you clearly articulated the misunderstanding the banking or the general public has with regard to the digitalization and what is mobile banking per se. Sri Lankan banking systems actually, with the guidance of the central, has embraced a very clear roadmap for digitalization and not simply focusing into the mobile banking services. I think the objective of the national payment roadmap is to achieve the coherence between national digitalization policy and goals of the banking industry. I think different banks had different roadmaps initially as to how to approach into this digitalization process. But with the articulation of the national payment roadmap by the central bank, I think that the banks have now got together and aligned their roadmaps towards the central bank's the mandate roadmap that had been decided. So actually in Sri Lanka, the central bank in February 2020, focusing on the areas such as expansion of interbank payment infrastructure and where they wanted to push and increase the participation of methods like Just Pay and also cardless ATM transactions, then accepting electronic payments by public and private sector through the LPOP systems, had actually initiated the engagement of banks in Sri Lanka to become in their digitalization roadmap. So some of the key highlights that I can make where the banks have already got involved in the digitalization is promoting the e-payments, which was another drive. The transactions fees on SEFT slips, RTGSs were reviewed and recommended to be reduced. And also NFC-based contactless payments were also heavily promoted during the last 1.5 to 2 years. And for an example, transaction values which were increased from 5,000 to 7,500 on cardless payments. Then also the e-payments that was promoted to underserved remote areas to ensure the inclusiveness. And Lanka QR solution, I think you may have heard how aggressively the Lanka QR in a common platform, the banking sector had now got into the deep segment of the market and to focus on the underprivileged, underbanked areas. And Lanka QR actually had promoted a common QR code base, and it had promoted all customers, merchants to accept that payment types. So also now like DFCC, many banks in Sri Lanka, most of the Sri Lankan banks are now in the QR platform and national card schemes and common point of sales. And I believe that that will accelerate with this pandemic that have got again infected the Sri Lankan banking sector and the economy. And to mention another point is the eKYC, which we all were waiting for a long period of time. And onboarding customers on an eKYC basis, I think the guidelines have now been issued by the central bank. Payment and settlements directors have issued the guidelines. And of course, the Sri Lankan registration of persons department is in the process of facilitating that the whole thing in the next couple of months. I believe currently the data have been incorporated up to about a certain year, and earlier than that year there is a little bit of difficulty. But I believe that the onboarding process that have been shortened right now will help the banking, not only banking, but the lots of customers to get onboarded. And the procedures and the guidelines that have been issued by the central bank also further help the banking community to onboard more and more customers. I think the SDA, Special Deposit Scheme, that have been introduced by the central bank about 1.5 to 2 years ago, all the banking community in Sri Lanka were able to onboard most of these customers using this eKYC, e-boarding basis. I think that's an important factor. And I also, at this moment of time, when we are on the digitalization process, want to emphasize the importance of the fintech collaboration that we are having now. There are many fintechs in Sri Lanka, including the FCC. We have our own fintech, and that will enable the banking to leverage distinguished capabilities and the knowledge the fintechs are having. I think central bank and the governing councils are looking at as to how some of these factors can be relaxed to enable the banking community to use the opportunities available in the fintech region, fintech area. And I think the interest of fintech to get into more into financial transaction mode. Previously we used to look at that as a competing business, but I think it's a more of a collaborative business now, and we need to look at that more sensitively now, considering the current situation. And some of the initiatives that we have also implemented from the DFCC, the virtual wallet is one kind of an example where we launched it before 2019 calamities, what happened in Sri Lanka, that had helped Sri Lankan business community to get more engaged into the digital form. So the iConnect is another product of ours, but similar products are now seen in the market by the other banks, which are actually helping the digital banking to a great extent. So I think I addressed a few points that I thought useful for your question that you raised, and I am free to answer any more questions that you may have on this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Lakshman. I think that was a very comprehensive coverage, both from the industry private sector initiative as well as regulatory support, which is in this space, e-payments, common QR code adoption, very importantly in a pandemic environment, promotion of contactless payments, which has really, I think, ballooned over the last 12 or 18 months. And I think the policy support we're getting towards accelerating the eKYC introduction, and hopefully that will be followed by the National Biometric and/or Digital ID project, which will certainly then make digital-focused banking and financial services efficient, productive, and a part of everyday citizens' lives. So it's a very, I think, promising thing, and I'm also very happy that you touched on fintech adoption. Rather than banks seeing fintechs as a threat, you're actually seeing them as nimble and an opportunity to engage them. And I'm also mindful that the fact that the Payments and Settlements Department in the central bank has actually framed a sandbox, which gives players like yourselves an opportunity to test fintech applications on a test environment before they are launched live. So I think the regulatory support is certainly also being there to encourage this sort of innovation and creativity, which I think is very promising. Thank you. Let's move on. The next question. A lot of talk has been mentioned about or discussed about the port city, which is today viewed as Sri Lanka's showpiece, and the CIFC, the Colombo International Financial Center, which is proposed within that infrastructure, is also positioning itself as South Asia's future international financial center. This question is to you, Yvette. Could you comment on how the central bank's regulatory oversight would actually support in attracting financial institutions, including non-banking FIs, offering alternate asset classes to actually come in and plug themselves into this system? And also, if possible, I would like you to touch on a couple of current topics as to how you see digital currency, maybe crypto exchanges in this space, and also if Port City is going to attract or offer gaming as an opportunity, how would the regulatory aspect of anti-money laundering or AML coverage be there to support that sort of a investment opportunity? To you, Yvette.
Yes, Mr. Tyagaraja, if I am to answer, I think I am going to take the rest of the 15 minutes for that. So I'll be very
Just
brief,
two points,
and I
just-
hope listeners would get further details on matters that I'm discussing, because the very important topic and a very timely thing, because of this Port City Act has been now already passed. And as many others, the central bank is also currently working to see how we can, how best and how expeditiously we should operationalize it. So if we just look at the framework, first of all, it is the commission that is entrusted with all the powers and functions of the port city. So looking at it, the objective, one objective definitely is encouraging and promoting global and regional investments in many areas of business, which includes offshore banking and also other financial services. So I think one very attractive feature of this commission is this single window investment facilitator, because we know whenever an investor comes, if they are to go to several places and spend time and also resources on getting necessary approvals and following other procedures, it is a non-starter. So I think very quite rightly it has brought to the act, it has been brought to the act itself that this is the place for facilitating all these investments that comes to the port city. So therefore, it is going to be very convenient, and the center of all operations is the commission, but there are provisions for interactions, consultations, facilitations by the regulator. So I also want to know, currently the Monetary Law Act is the act that is providing the necessary powers and authority to the central bank, which says as one of its core objectives the financial system stability. So in that sense, even though this separate act is there for the port city, for all purposes when it comes to the preserving the financial system stability of Sri Lanka, the Monetary Board, the central bank has a very distinctive role. And I am very happy that has been recognized in this law, even so to meet that dual purpose, providing easy, convenient investment while being mindful of the operating environment and giving the due recognition to the regulatory environment that is required, especially when it comes to banking and financial services. So if we look at the functions and how it is going to operate, what it says is someone who wants to start a business will have to be registered as an offshore company under our Companies Act. But there again, such person, such company does not go to the companies, the Director General of Companies, but they come to the Port City Commission, and everything is routed through that. With their facilitation, with their concurrence, these things are going to happen. Similarly, after they get this offshore offshore company status, they have a process to follow to get the offshore banking license or any other financial license. So when it comes to banking business, there is an authority that will be primarily given first recognition whether it is to be granted or not, and then there is a contact with the Minister of Finance, the Monetary Board, which will follow issuing the license to do offshore banking business. Then when it comes to the supervisory powers, again the act itself recognizes all the broad supervisory aspects that are covered when it comes to a banking operation or other financial services. So powers are again there for the commission to contact the minister and the Monetary Board, and in consultation to kind of issue regulations to provide this regulatory framework. Then I think with regard to the functions, now normally already we have these offshore banking units that are operating in our country as part of our existing banking banks. So similar to such operations, all such functions carried out by these offshore banking units at the moment, and any other function. So I am sure the business models that will be kind of set up by these particular banks that come there will be very much different from that is operating in our country. Even a local bank that is operating in Sri Lanka at this moment has a way to even have their own operations in the port city. So therefore, this lot of the interactions, the companies, local companies can do business there. The companies that come to the commission can have interactions with the other the normal banking system. So there are adequate safeguards. There are provisions to introduce the necessary safeguards in consultation with the relevant authorities. So it is quite the platform is set to have a very safe and sound banking and financial services operated in the port city itself. So I would not go to further detail there, but in referring to the kind of the certain products or certain aspects that you like virtual currencies, the cryptocurrencies and all, even at this moment central bank has already started some work on it. We know cryptocurrencies, virtual currencies are currently in operation, and the people have started investing in it, not only in Sri Lanka, even in other countries. Some countries have tried to bring in some regulations, but again they have withdrawn it. Some countries are still studying on it. So in similar manner, we are also looking at it, working and trying to see how best we could have, and I am sure taking note of the kind of business operation that is going to happen in the port city, we will be giving due regard for all these products and having an enabling environment to do to carry out whatever the kind of businesses that the commission feels that should be carried, because ultimately it is the port city commission that will decide the nature of activities, the type of businesses. So at the central bank we are ready to provide that necessary facilitation, whatever the kind of conveniences or the frameworks that we need to provide to carry out those smooth functions in the port city.
Thank you very much, Yvette. I think that was a very important message, especially the facilitation through a single window, which I think is very, very important, and the fact that the overarching responsibility for port city development, including the financial sector, is with the Commission, and the role of the central bank in providing the support and adaptive support to whatever businesses which come in there. So I think that was a very clear and a constructive message. Thank you very much. If we can move on to the next question, which relates to capital markets. This question is to you, Sujeeva. Banking and financial sector as a sector has played a very important role in propelling domestic capital markets, including the capitalization of the Colombo Stock Exchange. As the chairman of People's Bank, which is the largest, one of the largest unlisted public sector banks, would you see benefits of supporting a listing for People's Bank while also retaining the controlling ownership by the state, given its support in championing domestic development and growth, similar to the model adopted a few years ago by the State Bank of India as well as the State Bank of Pakistan, which are two local regional case studies which have done this. Do you see merits in that? Sujeeva.
Yeah, it's a very delicate kind of question. But looking at from my own bank, the perspective, why people go for listing, I think there are various reasons. Of course, one may be low-cost funding and risk-free, and the return you don't have to guarantee, and there are many more things, and the liquidity issue. But in our case, at the moment, my bank, People's Bank, we don't have that kind of issues. Even recent past, we went for a debenture, 20 billion debenture. That's the biggest ever debenture here in Sri Lanka. Within a couple of hours, we were able to get the required amount. It was, in fact, oversubscribed. So that is the brand name that we, People's Bank, carry, which is absolutely important. So therefore, of course, I being a private sector person, if you ask my personal view, obviously, we have to look at and get involved with the market, the transactions. But since this is a state-owned enterprise or a bank, at the moment, I don't see any reason why we should go for listing. I think that's very precise. Because of the interest of time, I think I should stop from there. This is how we look at.
Point taken, and I'm glad that you clarified that. The only reason I asked this from a slightly different perspective was, I'm sure both SBI and SBP would have had the same the single ownership mindset, but I think what they did by agreeing to list maybe 5 or 10% in either Nasdaq or one of the other markets, they brought up the level of governance from a regulatory and a disclosure level to a different perspective. As a result of that, even though it was only maybe a 10% which got listed, what it did for the value of the capitalization as well as the stock exchange itself in those countries was humongous. So that was the only reason I questioned that. But I'm glad that you have also been very focused in the views from the state. Just while you're on this subject, a question to perhaps yourself. On the port city, there is an audience question that while this is very much to encourage offshore banking as well as overseas asset managers to come in, do you see an opportunity as a local bank in any way to play a role in the port city? And I would also briefly ask Lakshman to comment on that after you, from an audience perspective.
Yes, yeah, I think we are, seriously looking at, we understand there are enormous amount of opportunities that will certainly, create because of this port city. And even at the moment, there are customers, there are international, local, global customers are approaching us to see how best, we can help, and they can bring their, the funding and things like that. We were waiting for first commission to be set up. Now it has been done. Now it's very clear, and Yvette explained about the governance structure and things like that, which is very important. And because of the one window, single window kind of approval system, which is absolutely important for this country. With that, now we can go to our international community and we can promote, we can bring more and more funds here to Sri Lanka. I think that is the need of the hour. Yeah. So I think we are very positive about the doing business with Port City in Sri Lanka when it comes for the the exact timing.
Thank you. Lakshman, from a private sector commercial bank, do you see any opportunities?
I think until recently, till the regulation was passed, and we were not very clear as to what the role that the Sri Lankan domestic banks can play in the port city. And once the regulation was announced, we have been now informed that there is no restriction for Sri Lankan domestic banks to take part to the port city activities. But only the restriction is that, like as you know, that previously we had this overseas banking unit operation that we could have operated in a normal way. But in case of port city, the legislation is very specific that the incorporation of a entity or to get engaged with port city activities, the bank, particular domestic bank, has to source funding from overseas. So we need to bring investment overseas and get the required approvals from the central bank and also from the commission, and to set up the banking. So I think from the SLBA point of view, since I deal with many of the CEOs of Sri Lankan banking community, I must tell you that there were lots of interest into getting to the activities with regard to the port city, which is going to be the emerging investment opportunity for Sri Lankan entrepreneurs as well as the investors from overseas. So to answer simply your question, yes, Sri Lankan domestic banks are interested, provided that we are able to attract foreign investments to the banking and set up a separate unit in the port city environment.
Thank you, Lakshman. End of the pandemic certainly does not appear to be at sight. As economies begin to adapt new norms of doing business, including business behavior, this question is to you, Bingumal. How do you see Standard Chartered preparing itself to adapt to the new norm in Sri Lanka?
One thing is we are not going back to the past. We tried the new normal. That also it has its pluses and minuses. I think we believe we need a better normal. So we are coming up with this thing called new ways of working, staying closer to home and closer to clients. So we are signing up with multiple service providers who can provide us space, so people can work from places where are closer to home. So that's been happening in multiple markets, and Sri Lanka is about to, will go live by Q3, also creating agile workspaces, more studios, more activity-based workstations and things like that, and also converting the workforce to be more agile and to work with a digital mindset. That's on the internal side. On the external side, I don't know if I have the time. On the external side, since global financial crisis, when you look at our markets, things have not got any better. From an inequality perspective and from a carbon emission perspective. So as a bank, we are taking a stand on net zero, as well as lifting participation, as well as resetting globalization. It's all about participating more in the SME space, more in the women entrepreneur space. Net zero is all about accelerating zero and supporting for green, brown industries to turn green. And on the resetting globalization, it's all about looking at the new companies getting into the global arena and helping the Sri Lankan new corporates to access the global markets. So those are the three things, because we in Standard Chartered, we believe that money can be a force for good, and we have to play our role.
Thank you very much, Bingu. Lakshman, I'm now posing this question to you in your capacity of the chairman of the SLBA. I think way back in 2015, the Sri Lanka Banks Association, together with the central bank and I believe IFC at that time, got together and launched the Sustainable Banking Initiative under the tagline Sri Lanka SBI. As the chairman of the SLBA, could you explain how this initiative is linked to particularly green financing initiatives, and how do you see it contributing towards to eventually minimizing the country's carbon footprint?
As you already explained, in 2015, when we signed up the agreements under the Sustainability Banking Initiative, it was only about 18 institutes that got involved. And happy to say that by about the last year, we have almost 21 organizations, Sri Lankan banks, who are involved in this particular initiative. And we signed for 11 sustainable banking principles, pledging to implement those, and with the minimum standards on a safeguard and platform for cooperation to promote and transition to a green economy. Actually, Sustainable Banking Principle number 7 talks about the green banking. When we really look at what are the initiatives the SLBA had done since 2015 to date, we had in many fronts that we have engaged in developing various shortcomings, gaps that we identified in 2015. Number one was the capacity building to support which is available to the bank. So we were, SLBA as an organization, developed the guide on how sustainable banking practices could be operationalized. So that was a key thing that we did in 2015. And thereafter, together with the stakeholders, we have now done a local case studies on environmental and social risk, and that had now made it public for our bankers to make use of it. And it took a while for us to set up the e-learning platform as well. Now the e-learning platform is available for all the stakeholders of the banking community in Sri Lanka to learn and to facilitate the green propositions. At the same time, SLBA actually joined hand with CBSL, Central Bank of Sri Lanka, in developing a sustainable financial roadmap for Sri Lanka. So that also was important. I think it was partly supported by the IFC as well. And we now regularly get involved with the Central Bank Training Center to educate the general public. So that those are some of the key things that actually SLBA is doing to build the capacity. In addition to that, develop the international cooperation. I think we have now got the engagement of UN Financial Center to develop the financial to create an awareness programs in Sri Lanka for the banking. If you really look at the what the banking sector and the real what we have done to the real economy, we have actually created a dialogue promoting sustainable agriculture through sustainable finance in collaboration with the Sri Lankan Agripreneurs Forum. That's an important aspect, that we have got the agricultural related entrepreneurs to come forward and discuss with them. And also with a few foreign banks, we have organized dialogue and discussions with them. Now, if you really look at what are the initiatives the banking community had made to support the green climate or green energy or green concept, if you really look at from 2016 onwards, Sri Lankan banks, with the support of ADB, 10 banks already had actually by 2017 started promoting the rooftop solar financing in Sri Lanka. And 2081 solar rooftop installations were done at that time, and that creates 23.5 megawatts. And according to the roadmap of ADB, we are to complete about 60 megawatt solar powers for Sri Lanka by the banking. So, and in addition to that, in 2016, Sri Lankan banks actually created 10 megawatt ground-mounted solar projects in Hambantota. So these are also very important for Sri Lanka, and there is an acceleration process right at the moment. As my colleague Bingu mentioned, some of those funding that are coming on our way will help to propagate and increase the capacities of solar, wind, and various other projects. In addition to that, as you are aware, there are banks that have been started actually smart agriculture projects. And in addition to that, the Sri Lankan banking actually already started waste to energy, funding of waste to energy projects in Sri Lanka to increase the green climate initiatives and to reduce the carbon footprint in Sri Lanka. So these are some of the initiatives. Due to the time limitation, I won't be able to go into detail much more, but SLBA together with Central Bank is heavily involved in creating the sustainability bank initiatives to make sure the Sri Lankan will achieve the sustainable economic growth.
Thank you very much, Lakshman. That was a very comprehensive coverage of sustainable initiatives. I think in summary, if I can summarize the last 55 or so minutes of discussion, I think the key take home for all of us is the banking sector itself is a very robust sector, a firm but an adaptive style of regulatory oversight, fintech savvy and future ready capacity, high standards of institutional corporate governance, and last but not least, sustainability focused business. So ladies and gentlemen, especially for the investor fraternity who is listening to this, Sri Lankan banking system is ready to serve and support you. It's up to you now to pick the sweet spot you have identified, and we will be ready to engage with you. With that, let me thank the panelists for your time and your very valuable insights, and for the organizers to give us this opportunity. Have a great day.